We've chatted about leader development, when good people are bad leaders. We've talked about how leadership differs from but complements management, the benefits of strong relationships with our peers, why teams often just don't work, and a whole lot more this season. In this episode, the season 1 finale, we're going to focus on the best of the rest. Yep, we're going to wrap up the season by highlighting the most compelling and impactful leadership communication ideas and practices we've discussed this season. Thanks for joining us for the season 1 finale of The Communicative Leader. Hello and welcome to The Communicative Leader, hosted by me, Dr. Leah O'Million-Hodges. My friends call me Dr. O. I'm a professor of communication and a leadership communication expert. On The Communicative Leader, we're working to make your work life what you want it to be. Hi, my friends. I'm so excited to chat with you today. My leaders, we have done a lot this season. I'm very naively thought compiling episode 15, this episode, would be fairly straightforward. We already have the other 14 in hand. I wrote the scripts, the interview questions. But it turns out, and again, self-proclaimed leadership communication nerd here, but we've done so much good and had so much fun this season. It was really challenging to consider what to pull out, what to raise up, and leave us with as we plan for season 2. Also, considering the sheer breadth of topics we've covered, it was also challenging in figuring out how to integrate these ideas in a meaningful way. I like you all way too much just to leave you with a laundry list of here's what I liked in episode 1, or remember this from episode 2, and huzzah, episode 3, so on and so forth. So this one, it took some time. This one, it took some thought. So what did I end up with? What are we going to do today? We're going to look at our highlights in 4 sections and then end, as we always do, with some communication-based tips and practices. So what are these 4 sections? We're going to look at leadership truths. We're going to look at the power of communication. Our 3rd section, relationships, also known as playing nicely in the sandbox with others. And 4, formal and informal leadership, or owning and developing your expertise. So now we have our roadmap. We can dive into our first section, leadership truths. So these are my leadership truths, but I feel strongly enough about them to share them. Well, since this is a best of episode, I already have, but anyway, I feel strongly enough about them to not only share them with you twice, but to encourage you to think about them, to let them sink in, let them marinate, see how they feel, see how they fit. Leadership truth number 1. Leadership can be learned, it can be practiced, and it can be honed. I know we've done this before, but I want you to repeat after me. Leaders are made, not born. Leaders are made, not born. Leaders are made, not born. Leaders are individuals who value communication and they learn how to do it well. Considering this, one of the few things that makes me very angry is when someone tries to convince others that leaders are born. Why does this get under my skin? Well, it can tap right into someone's fear that they are not a leader, or that perhaps they can't grow into a leader, or they don't know anyone around them who is a leader. It comes from a deficit perspective, and it is very exclusive. It typically prizes those who already have privilege and discourages those who do not. Now, we are throwing that one out. We are casting it to the side, and we are not looking back. Not just because I don't like it because of the reasons above, but because it's wrong. It's just not accurate, folks. A communicative view of leadership means that, like any other communication-based skill, it can be learned, it can be improved, and it can be mastered. How, you ask? Well, I want us to look at 2 functions of leaders. Leaders inspire others. Leaders connect with people via their communication. They ask questions, they listen, they spend time with them, develop relationships, build trust. What else? Inspiration for one employee is likely to look a whole lot different than for another employee. Does Tim need a tough love approach, borrowing from the years he spent in athletics when a coach would yell at him to motivate him? This communication is going to look a whole lot different than Della, who has told you that they shut down when they feel criticized. What is another function that leaders do? They collaborate with their team to accomplish work goals. A formal leader might try to lead their team from the front. They set deadlines, they assign tasks, they check in periodically. They might also recognize they have the expertise on the team to allow them to lead from behind, to create space for this team to come together to propose a path for completing the project. How do leaders figure this out? Again, asking questions, observing, interacting with their team, reflecting on how their presence impacts the team and the team's output. Again, it is both art and science, my friends, but what it all boils down to is communication. Another thing we talked about this season that reiterates the fact that leaders are made, as Shine told us, good leaders, truly effective leaders, are those who dedicate themselves to lifelong learning. Learning leaders don't only practice this as an individual, they inspire others too, and go even further to use their formal power to create an organizational culture dedicated to encouraging and facilitating and rewarding continuous growth and improvement. Leaders who don't grow, organizations that don't evolve, what happens to them? Well, we know the ending to that story, right? Those successes, if they have them, are likely to be short-lived. And this leads us to our second leadership truth. Leadership development enhances us professionally, but also personally. So yes, of course, taking time to develop as a leader helps you professionally. You, my friend, right now, listening to this podcast, you are working on yourself. You have more tools and more agility to be successful in the workplace. Certainly, you can read books, you can attend a workshop, you can go to a conference. You have lots of opportunities and options in terms of professional development. And while that is amazing, I also want to consider what comes along with developing as a leader. In its simplest form, leadership means to influence. This may help you to make some more pro-social choices. With all of my writing and all of my teaching and research in leadership, you will not find me walking by litter on the street. And here's the thing, if you do, you will see me sigh heavily, turn around, and go pick it up. Why? I have leadership on the brain. It's the lens I try to use throughout my life. It means engaging in behaviors I'd like to see and behaviors that align with my values. I value a clean campus and neighborhood and city. I value being responsible and taking care of our environment. Therefore, I pick up the litter. I recycle it. Is this what all of my leadership development is focused on? Heck no. But does spending time dedicated to improving as a leader bleed over and impact us as people? You betcha. Another element of leader development we often overlook include the elements of adversity that are part and parcel with common organizational passages. So some of these routines or passages that allow us or force us to overcome adversity include joining a company, having a project fail, having to work with a bad manager, or work with competitive peers. Maybe we've lost our ambition. Maybe we're really experiencing challenges trying to manage and balance our work and our life. And what about when we have a loss of faith in our department, or we just don't know if we believe in our organization anymore? In all of these situations and myriad others, we have options. Two of these options include either failing forwards or failing backwards. Many will fail backwards. We've all had these moments. So it's important we're not taking time to point fingers or spend too much time shaking our heads at others. Again, this is not the goal, but sometimes it happens. So what does failing backwards look like? We might blame others. We might repeat the same error. But here's the thing. If yelling at our team didn't motivate them last time, what makes us think it's going to work this time? We might set unrealistic expectations for ourselves and others. We're going to internalize those disappointments rather than learning from them. And when it gets hard, we quit. We walk away. We decide we just can't do it. So what's the gold standard? What do exceptional leaders do instead? Take responsibility. A litmus test for if you're leading and leading well, you're responsible, especially for mistakes or shortcomings. But we're not stopping there. We're going to make a new plan. We're going to adapt as we learn from the previous mistakes. And we can take some calculated risks, right? We've considered possible consequences, but the potential benefits are greater. Not only do we persevere, but we remember our attitude matters. We're not grumbling through it. We're role modeling resilience. The last thing I want to leave you with underneath the leader truth section. So what if a leadership stint didn't go well in the past? Well, that's okay. Learn from it and let it go. As we know, leadership, it's a communication skill, and we can all learn it and we can all improve on it. We aren't going to connect with everyone, no matter how hard we try. We don't have to be friends with everyone. What we do have to do, though, is to treat them with respect. Be responsible with our language and actions and create an environment that is safe. Differences can be very, very powerful in terms of creating a strong, able team with lots of bench strength. But differences can mean we need to work a bit harder to forge these relationships. Leaders are adept communicators. You can do this. This leads us to our second section, the power of communication. A communicative view, it moves us away from traditional leadership theories that say leadership is in a specific person or role, and instead it helps us to see we all have the ability to enact leadership in a way that is unique, that fits us as an individual, rather than trying to model certain characteristics that make you feel more like you're acting than you're truly interacting. Remember, my friends, leaders are not heroes. They are thoughtful, adept communicators. If you don't already, I want you to start to equate your communication ability with your leadership ability. Keep in mind, my friends, communication is a yardstick used to assess your leadership ability. You might be thinking, what? How does that make any sense? What about the outcomes of my leadership, my successes? How does my skill as a communicator impact my leadership ability? Well, my friends, these go hand in hand. Without a solid focus on your communication skills, you're not likely to rack up too many wins. If we think of elements of leading or being a formal authority role, manager, supervisor, director, these are positions that are visible. Wait, aren't all roles visible, you ask? Well, yes, of course. But when you're in a formal leadership role, others are literally looking to you to set the tone, for feedback, for cues on how to react, to take the pulse on a decision or a meeting outcome. As a manager, director, supervisor, team lead, your own leader is also looking at you and to you, watching to see how you interact with your team, how you handle yourself in meetings, how your performance reflects on them. See, my friends, when in formal leadership roles, you are very, very visible. Your verbal and nonverbal communication behaviors are on display, prompting others to make assessments, make judgments about your leadership ability. As we just mentioned, if we're simplifying leadership to its most basic of definitions, it means to influence. If a leader cannot communicate a clear vision, develop productive and trusting relationships, listen to others' concerns, then his or her tenure is likely to be brief. Moreover, as the workgroup employee with the most position power, the leader is charged with communicating on behalf of the team to argue for additional resources or alleviate organizational obstacles. If you can't do that effectively, that tenure is likely to be rocky and likely to be very brief as well. Knowing that others are making interpretations about our leadership based on our verbal and nonverbal behaviors, it might feel a little strange, especially if you're new to a communicative view of leadership. I get it. It kind of gets in your head. What is my posture saying about me? Okay, uncross my arms. Okay, open shoulders. Shoot, I need to be thinking about what's coming out of my mouth at the same time. Ay. But my friends, there is power, so much power in being aware of this fact. This leads us to another key idea. Not only is communication the measure used to assess your leadership ability, but it is also the most accessible and powerful tool you have. Bonus, it's free. It doesn't require technology or years of education or training, just some intention and some reflection. When you think about communication as your vehicle to demonstrate leadership and to navigate conflict and maintain relationships, you can start to see the power in it. Two closely related ideas I want you to consider in this regard: relationship management and credibility. Relationship management is powerful. In the third section, we're really going to dive into relationships, but it is also important for us to see the link with relationships and the power of communication. All of my friends out there, all ranks, all industries, really want you to think about relationship management and credibility. Even if you're not in a formal leadership role and not even interested in one, relationships form the foundation of our lives. Whether with our partner, our kids, our extended families, our neighbors, our peers, taking a step back to view these associations through a communicative lens will help you to strengthen your relationships, to focus your attention on communicating in intentional ways, in audience-centered ways. When our relationships are in good places, solid places, that frees us up for everything else in our lives, to create, to have fun, to focus. When relationships are feeling unstable or crumbling or especially trying, well, it's hard to stay present. Credibility is huge too. Trying to be mindful of powerless language, owning your qualifications and accomplishments, making the time to prepare. These are small things that go a long, long way in developing and maintaining relationships and in successfully gaining the trust of your audiences and in demonstrating goodwill. When we think about the power of communication, it's also important to think about it from a technical perspective. Why? Because doing so lets us think about what goes into communicating well. Simply put, we have 4 ingredients. We have the channel, we have the timing of delivery, we have the message itself, and receiving feedback. Think of this as an ongoing cycle. What if you have a hard time with feedback? Well, my friend, you just broke the cycle. No, I'm kidding. That's an overstatement. But to have fruitful relationships, to have honest, trusting relationships, we need to be mindful of these 4 aspects of the communication process. Now I want us to think about this in more concrete ways. And a way that we're going to do that is returning to the idea of it's not what you say, but how you say it. As we know, distressing news can be palatable if it's delivered in a timely manner, in a way that speaks to the audience's needs. Might be layoffs, be direct, provide the information you have. Be specific about when additional information will be made available and via what channels. Another way that we can see this is in the way that we chat about our everyday organizational occurrences. My friends out there who are in formal leadership positions or who advise or supervise others, it can be really, really frustrating when an employee or even a kiddo continues to make a mistake or forget a process or overlook something that we have talked about so many times. Well, it is human to snap back with, "You just don't understand," or "You just don't get it." It's not going to go over well. Shocker, right? What's an employee-centered way to address the situation? Instead of "You just aren't getting it," try, "How can I best support you?" There is more than a good chance that your employee or your child knows that they aren't meeting your expectations. Instead of responding with that reactive response, it's better to have a frank conversation to see what additional resources they need in order to be successful. Let's look at one more example together of say this, not that. You're chatting with an employee and working to make decisions on a project so you can meet a deadline. And you find yourself feeling really frustrated because they keep bringing up something that feels like a tangent, or at the very least, not particularly germane to what you're working on right now. What's a common reactive response? That's not important. Forget about it. But what does your employee or your peer hear? My ideas don't matter. My ideas are silly, which can then turn into, I'm silly. I don't matter. Our responses have consequences, positive and negative. If we know that we can communicate the same sentiment in an audience-centered way to better effect, heck yeah, that's what we're going to do. So what do we say instead? It sounds like you've thought of some potential concerns. Let's talk about them. Certainly, you can set a different day and a different time, but the act of showing your employee that you hear them, that their thoughts matter, and that you're taking them seriously goes a long way in demonstrating your leadership ability and maintaining trust in the relationship. This leads us to our third focus, relationships, otherwise known as playing nicely in the sandbox with others. The relationship you share with your leader, with each of your peers, and with the group as a whole radically impacts how it feels to work in that team. Yeah, right, you say. How's that possible? How can the relationships I share with my peers tell you about my experience at work? Well, those of you who have created high-quality relationships with your manager, you have mutual trust, you have respect. The manager can come to you with a directive, and they know it is going to be done and done well. Yeah, those who have that quality of relationship with the leader, they're likely to develop strong relationships with peers who are also in the in-group with the leader. And folks, I don't use in-group here loosely or as slang. It's not the same as all the cool kids are doing it. This is really a technical term, I kid you not. In-group members tend to hang together. If you've heard that phrase, birds of a feather tend to stick together, same idea applies here. So I want us to follow this thread a bit further. You, my friend, have a great relationship with your manager. You trust her to make decisions that are best for the group, feel like she takes your preferences into account, and she frequently praises your contributions. And she should. You, my friend, you are awesome. You're working hard, and you have established yourself as a trusted member of the team and an expert in your area. Now you're working on a project and you're not quite sure where to go next. You have some ideas, but it'd be really helpful to have some feedback, someone to bounce ideas off of. Who do you go to? Likely someone else that your manager trusts, counts on, and looks to as well. Why don't we go to that person that we can tell our manager just barely tolerates, or the person they downright demonstrate some form of contempt for? Yeah, I think we know these answers. Either they don't likely know because they weren't invited to the same meetings, or we don't have that type of relationship where we can just come in and chat informally, or we recognize we might not necessarily want to be seen spending a lot of time with them. Why? We recognize, and sometimes this is just implicitly, that it would not necessarily be great to be seen with the lower status member. My listeners who are parents out there, all the times you've told your kids to be mindful of who they're seen with, who they associate with. Guilty by association, you were right. So we know that those of you who have a great relationship with the leader, our in-group members, are likely to befriend other in-group members. So what does this mean? Well, it means you have access to collectively more. It means that your work life is likely to be a bit easier. Not only do you have your leader's ear or their mentoring or their support, but you have that from your peers who also have access to your leader's positive resources and discretion. In-group members tend to make more money. They tend to be happier at work, enjoy working on more challenging, higher status projects. They have more positive exchanges and feedback from the manager, and increased access to organizational and personal resources. I want you to think professional development, mentoring, and role latitude. Okay, we get it, right? That's what you're saying. It is important to establish this high quality relationship with your manager, because not only does it impact important things like your earning potential, but in large ways, it also shapes who you're likely to befriend. What does that mean if we've gotten off on the wrong foot with our manager, or if no matter what we do, We still feel like they treat us poorly. They dismiss our ideas, or they fail to provide required training. Or what if we're in a season in our life where we're doing what is required and no more, and our manager doesn't see us as a team player? These things happen. But what does that mean if we're not in the in-group? Well, you're in the out-group. Again, yes, a real term, I promise. I know it sounds so juvenile. You're in the out-group, you're in the out-group. But again, my friends, I promise you, this is an official term we use to describe those who don't have such a great relationship with the leader. This can range from an average quality to one that is downright destructive. While in-group members enjoy many benefits and privileges, well, it's not quite the same for those in the out-group. These members not only don't necessarily have the ear of their leader, they're often assigned tasks and projects that are less desirable, receive fewer raises, and they're less likely to be able to make up some of those losses at the peer level. Why is that? Because in-group members tend to connect and cozy up with other in-group members. Out-group members often find themselves in a position to only connect with other out-group peers as well. The fact that research continues to show consistent links between the relationship you share with your leader and the quality of your peer relationships, it reiterates the power communication plays in leadership and work group dynamics. There is no easier way to put it than relationships flourish or flounder as a result of a series of communicative interactions. Part of the reason that peers are as influential as they are, it's because of the variety of needs that they help meet and the variety of roles they fulfill during our work life. We are hardwired to connect with others and develop relationships to fulfill our interpersonal needs. So what are some of the reasons that we seek to develop relationships with peers at work? Well, a sanity check, right? Are you seeing this, right? Work values or life interest similarities. Proximity, they're just close. Work safety, right? Having someone we trust. While these reasons speak to our belongingness needs, there are other reasons, professional or strategic reasons, we might befriend others. It can give us a sense of validation. They can affirm our ideas. They might be able to give us better access to promotions when we team up or we learn from them. And higher social capital. Yeah, friends, we are talking about popularity and access here. At the end of the day, we can boil this down to social support. With solid, trusting relationships in place, we can give and receive emotional, informational, and instrumental support. And now, my friends, we dive into our fourth and final section of Best of the Rest, formal and informal leadership, or owning and developing your expertise. You are positioned to lead with or without a title. Your communication decisions and actions are what allow you to emerge as a leader, to develop trusting relationships, and to navigate conflict and other tricky situations in a pro-social, respectful, and dignified manner. I think it's important to think about leadership communication from the perspective of not just formal managers, but as an employee in any role, because truly in all positions, there will be so many opportunities to lead. So I hope to speak to everyone here because informal leadership is so important. One of the questions I receive most frequently is, am I a leader? Am I doing it correctly? This was an episode I really enjoyed thinking about and writing because we're able to distill a relatively complex question into a very straightforward and pragmatic way. Are you communicating and acting in ways that are respectful, responsible, and safe? When we think about respectful, there are so many ways in which we can consider respectful from a leadership perspective. But I want us to think about inclusion, and I want you to think about how to connect with those who are in different ages or stages than yourself. We know that many today are electing to work well into their 70s. So there's a good chance that members from 4 generations might find themselves working shoulder to shoulder. So this brings a wealth of benefits, different perspectives, opportunity for enhanced mentoring, but it can introduce some challenges, such as how do we connect with those who are at a different life stage or a different career stage? While the leader can play a large role in motivating employees across stages, it's essential to consider the role that peer relationships can play. Peers in the same stage can empathize and encourage others in ways that others in different stages might not be able to do. It might also be helpful to consider how to pair peers across stages or ages to keep them engaged in developing professionally and personally. Just as there are many ways in which to apply a lens of respect to leading, same is the case with being responsible. Today, I'd like us to consider responsible in terms of setting and navigating the course of the work group. We're talking training and development, resource management, and actively planning for the future. Responsible then means being very intentional about work group practices and consistent with communication. This ties directly into the scaffolding or support beams. If we want to foster a specific work group culture, an engaged, always involving, supportive one, for example, we need to model this behavior and provide specific steps for how our employees can do so successfully as well. For example, this might mean being transparent about how much of the budget is available for personal development, whether it's training, attending a conference, or funds to purchase a book or webinar. A manager might ask employees to submit proposals or provide funds on a rotating quarterly basis. If you value a supportive work group, we could ask employees who are really shining in an area to lead a lunch and learn about that particular skill. Responsible applies to today, the immediate future, the next few months, and longer term planning as well. This is where it can get tricky. I've worked with many managers who will say, I'm not going to be here that long. I have my eyes on the director role. Or as soon as I hit the 2-year mark, I'm going to start looking. That is well and fine. You do you. I will never discourage an employee for advocating for themselves. But I will stop formal leaders when they're shirking part of their duties. Leaders are future-oriented, whereas managers focus on the present. Leaders set a vision for what is next. They think strategically about where the organization or unit is today and what it could reasonably grow into in the future. Leaders leave a legacy. They leave the department or organization better than how they found it. This brings us to SAFE. It's a perfect segue to that final leadership focus. This is one I had to think about for a bit, and I told you that when we went through this episode, right? Respectful, responsible, of course, easy peasy. Safe, well, of course, I want a safe workplace, but a safe leader? My natural inclination is to say yes, I want a safe leader, of course, but what does that mean? And sometimes safe gets a bad rap, like playing it safe, meaning no calculated risks. When I was thinking about safe, I looked up the definition of it. The prevention and control of injuries or other consequences or harm caused. This helped me clarify the link immediately. Prevention of injury. So again, those of you who work in a shop or other dangerous environments, my first responders out there, this has a very literal, very tangible outcome. For those of you in other industries, this might not land on the surface. Like what? But think about prevention of emotional injuries. Think of a work environment where you can brainstorm freely without the fear of feeling like innovative ideas will be met with scorn or laughter. Think of a work environment where your leader is there to provide support, whether it's to listen, to brainstorm, to monitor a situation when you have a challenging client, or a workplace where your leader escalates concerns when needed, making sure that you and your team members feel safe and protected in order to do the work you were hired to do. The final aspect of SAFE I want us to consider is the notion or idea of preventing other consequences or harm caused. Consequences. This is really important for leaders out there to consider. At the helm, your job is to steer that ship. It's your job to consider what lies ahead, to help to remove or circumvent obstacles you see from your position. One idea I like to think about is we have an employee who's been working really hard at his public speaking, but is he quite ready to MC that event? So maybe instead of throwing him out there and hoping it ends up being a positive experience, or worse yet, chastising when it doesn't go well and we feel embarrassed, this means stepping in to perform the responsibilities ourselves or enlisting the help of another. Or better yet, maybe we ask the budding public speaking employee to welcome everyone and introduce the MC. Perhaps there are other opportunities to allow them some practice, but not put the weight of an entire event on their shoulders yet. This is being a leader, thinking of the well-being, the physical and emotional safety of your employees. Our employees, they're not mind readers, nor are we as formal leaders mind readers. Communication is the vehicle we use to express our expectations, to set boundaries, and to articulate our needs. Well, the most frequently asked question I receive is how to know if I'm leading. The second most often posed question I receive, tell me about managers versus leaders. This debate began in 1977 when a Harvard Business School professor published an HBR article with a very deceptively mild title, Managers and Leaders, Are They Different? Wow, my friends, this piece caused an uproar. It argued that many researchers of the time were missing half the puzzle, the half filled with inspiration, with vision, with the whole spectrum that human drives and desires. You know what? The study of leadership hasn't been the same since. So what's the verdict here? Different but complementary. In a complex and communicatively fast-paced workplace, one can't function without the other. While managers promote stability and leaders encourage change, only organizations that embrace this contradiction can thrive, particularly in turbulent times. Sound familiar? Global pandemic, great resignation, quiet quitting phenomenon? Let's think about how managers and leaders are different, how they overlap, and how we can't survive without the other. So while many use the term leader and manager interchangeably, they're not synonyms. Certainly they share similarities, but again, they don't replicate each other. What is a key difference? Managers primarily cope with complexity. Leaders primarily cope with change. Complexity and change. Now we can start to see why organizations need both managers and leaders, particularly with the ever-changing, unpredictable global market as of late. So I want us to look at both of these individually, complexity and change. Complexity can be a really beautiful thing when it's all in alignment. When employees are engaged in accomplishing their individual tasks, when they share information with each other, and they're committed to the operation as a whole. This interdependence can really lead to transformative change, incredible output, and engaged and fulfilled employees. But complexity can really be a pain in the butt, right? I know, I had to say it. You're rolling your eyes at me when I give you this line about complexity being this really beautiful thing. Complexity can also mean struggle. It can mean hardship. It can mean hurt feelings. It can mean feeling stuck. Feeling like we're not sure what the next move is or the possible consequences of that move. Well, enter managers. Managers are a response to one of the most significant business developments of the 20th century, large organizations. Without solid management, complexity becomes chaos. We move from a finely tuned machine or a garden growing in unison. Again, I wanted to give another illustration that isn't our typical machine-based one, to a group of loosely coupled individuals collectively feeling like chickens with their heads cut off. Ay, ay, ay. So now we have this basic idea of why we need managers, complexity. Let's introduce our second word, change. Change. What comes to mind when you hear this word? For some, it's excitement, the beckoning of something new, unexpected. But for others, for many really, change can be associated with fear, with anxiety, with the unknown. Regardless of your personal reaction to the word, We need to think about organizations and what happens if they resist change. If they embrace the status quo indefinitely, you might be saying, hey, my organization rocks, especially my friends out there who own small businesses and you're enjoying some success. I'm sure it does, and you're really amazing, truly. Talk about the work you put into this endeavor, but your success is likely from meeting your customers, your clientele, where they are now. Today, you know where they are. You know how to communicate with them, what to say to them, and when to communicate with them. But I am sure we can chat with some folks who saw social media or the internet as a flash in the pan, as something that was a fad, as something that serious business owners and organizations didn't need to pay attention to. Well, we know how that likely panned out for them. Leaders can help to forecast here. They look ahead, they plan, they ideate, they connect, frame, and build. Leaders are thinking about competitors, about market factors, tech changes, the volatility of the stock market, labor laws, global politics, sanctions, right? The list goes on and on. So to recap, we're talking about managers and leaders and complexity and change. So I'm going to take it a step further. What else do managers do? What else do leaders do? They assess what needs to be done. They cultivate and maintain relationships to build networks. They connect and communicate with people they oversee. So again, they accomplish tasks that are relatively similar, but they go about them in unique and important ways. Managers address and wrangle complexity by planning and budgeting, organizing and staffing, and controlling and problem solving. So what about our leaders? What do these change agents do in organizations to keep them evolving, remaining relevant? They set a direction, they align people, and they motivate and they inspire. So we know how managers and leaders are similar. We see that complexity and change tie them together, but in distinct ways. So what is best practice? What should organizations strive for? Well, figuring out how to marry management and leadership. Planning works best not as a substitute for direction setting, but as a complement to it. A competent planning process serves as a useful reality check on direction setting activities. A competent direction setting process provides focus when planning is realistically carried out, helps to clarify what kind of planning is essential and what is irrelevant. When we think about aligning people and staffing, we can't align anyone when clear structure is missing. If we don't know our own responsibilities in contrast to others, how our unit fits with the organization, alignment point is moot. The elements of staffing and aligning go hand in hand and can't exist without the other. So I think you're starting to see the pattern here. It leads us to motivating and controlling and problem solving. All of the intentional, other-oriented, and inclusive language is going to leave you, well, likely exactly where you are if you don't have mechanisms in place to maintain processes and quickly correct issues that come up. The alternative, if we don't take the time to acknowledge our people, what they do, how they help to make us us, well, then the time spent planning and staffing for excellent quality control and problem solving is going to fall short. Why stay here a long time when I can do what I can do at another place that will appreciate it? Well, managers and leaders initiate and facilitate different processes in organizations. Again, they are both essential for an organization to remain successful. And now, my friends, we've wrapped up our 4 sections dedicated to the best of the rest. We've chatted about leadership communication. I want to leave us with a few of the most impactful communication strategies we've talked about this season. Why? Why 3? If you're only going to focus on 3 tangible practices, and I get it, it takes a lot of bandwidth to navigate your workplace, complete your tasks, and work on a new communication practice. But my friends, I know you trust me by now. I wouldn't lead you astray. These tips, these strategies, yeah, they're going to help you at work, but they're also going to help you express yourself with greater confidence in all areas of your life. not just with greater confidence, but with more clarity and in an audience-centered way, so your message connects in a respectful yet impactful way. We're going to look at avoiding powerless language. We're going to look at using I statements, and we're going to be on the lookout for ways to add to our self-efficacy. So the first one, avoiding powerless language. I was kind of hoping, maybe, if you want, powerless language diminishes our credibility, and it can cause others to not see us as an authority, to see us rather as a low status member, less important, less likely to have our ideas heard or considered. Certainly, we need to remain aware of context of the norms of relationships and the workplace, but at the same time, the way we present requests impacts how others see us. Yes, we always communicate in respectful, diplomatic ways, but we need to be mindful that more often than not, we're the ones who are charged with abdicating for ourselves. So what are some common types of powerless language? Disclaimers. This is when we're denying responsibility. You probably are going to say no, or you probably won't pick up this idea, but nope, we're gonna avoid that. Hesitations, any of those vocal fillers that aren't really saying anything, we're gonna throw those out too. Tag questions. This is when we assert an idea or we offer a solution, and then instead of leaving it at that, we say something like, "Don't you think?" or "Don't you agree?" Similarly, when we hedge, "I guess," or "sort of," "kind of." Again, this isn't adding anything to the conversation that wasn't there before. And finally, intensifiers. When we're using language such as really, really excited, or very, very, things like this. Certainly, they can be used in an impactful way to emphasize a point, but it's something that we want to use strategically and not just a way to fill silence. By avoiding powerless language, we automatically sound more assertive because we're focusing on the content. That is, we're focusing on the goal of the exchange. When we use powerless language, we get stuck in thinking about how rather than what we're communicating. Now that we're mindful of avoiding powerless language, our next communication practice is to use I statements. I statements let us express how we feel and what we need. Using I statements empower us to advocate for ourselves, really important in times of conflict. I statements make us reflect about how we are feeling. We're not going to get too far if we open our mouth to say, "I feel," long, awkward pause. So naturally, they give us a moment for reflection, a moment to check in and see how we are. Where are we? How has a certain decision or idea struck us? I feel excited and hopeful about this meeting. Even taking the time to verbalize something like this can help to get our team on the same page, and in this case, generate additional collective energy. Well, I like I statements because by nature, they require a quick check-in and reflection to identify our feelings. They're also really productive for navigating conflict or tricky conversations. Let's say we went into a big meeting, and even though we discussed ahead of time that we would take the lead, it ended up feeling like we were playing a supporting role to our peer. Instead of sweeping these crummy feelings under the rug, because again, remember, these unresolved conflicts, it tends to grow legs and attach itself to future conversations and projects. It's important to have a conversation. We can start with saying, "You make me so angry, you embarrassed me, and you stole the show." Yeah, that's an option, but you don't need a PhD in communication to realize that's likely to end badly. But what if we use I statements instead? "Hey, I was hoping we could chat. I'm glad that the meeting went so well, but I'm feeling a little frustrated about the way the presentation shook out. We discussed me taking the lead ahead of time, but in the meeting, I didn't feel like I had the chance to." Depending on the relationship you share with that peer, you can add a bit more, such as a focus on the collective success of the department or focusing on an event or project or an idea. It's always recommended over focusing on the person. In these settings, context is king. How does your peer respond? Do they immediately say, I know, I'm so sorry. When I get nervous, I just talk and talk. I will work on this. Do they take responsibility in another way? I realized that partway through, but it felt like the meeting was going really well and I didn't want to interrupt the flow. I'm so sorry I threw a curveball. If your comments are met that way, great. But what happens if they're met with disdain or just brushed off? You still have additional options. You can continue to use I statements to express how you feel. I appreciate your work in there and I'm glad our meeting went well. I do best though when I have a plan in place ahead of time, so it's important to me we're on the same page before and during meetings. When you change the plans on the spot, I have a hard time remaining present and focused because I'm trying to predict where the meeting may go next. Again, I statements are great because they allow us to acknowledge our feelings, present them in a way to advocate for ourselves, and in a way that doesn't put the blame on others, but it shows them how their behaviors have impacted us. The last communication practice I'm going to leave you with, always looking for ways to enhance your self-efficacy. If you remember, self-efficacy, it is this deep belief we have in ourselves, in our ability to be successful in a given situation. It's deeper than self-confidence. Confidence is situational. I am confident I can give a solid leadership communication lecture, sure. I am not confident in my ability to bring down the house via karaoke. Nope, very different, not going to happen. I like to think of self-efficacy as a bank. We do things that are new, that are scary, but we try them anyway. We find ways to demonstrate and sharpen our expertise. We're making deposits to the self-efficacy. We keep adding and adding so that when a big project doesn't go well or we don't get the job we thought we were a shoo-in for, we have a large reserve of self-efficacy to help keep us afloat as we get back up and try again. So how do we bolster our self-efficacy? Well, remember, my friend, we have 4 sources. So mastery experiences, this means we're learning on the fly. We're learning, we're actually doing things. We nailed that sales pitch. We finally ran the report on our own without any errors. Whatever the task was, you attempted it and you did it successfully. 2, vicarious experiences. Watching others can help us to feel more capable. I really like to think about when we're traveling abroad here. Where do I buy my train ticket fare? Do I insert a ticket into a machine or is it more like a tap to pay situation? Watching others allows us to gather information about what to do in order to be successful. Number 3, social persuasion. And this is one that we work on internally, that inner monologue, and also externally, the way that we connect with others. What's that inner monologue? Can't do it or can't do it yet. Always try to add yet when I hear one of my students or one of my kids say that, I can't do it. There is a big difference between I can't do it and I can't do it yet. I can't do it hard stop means I'm fundamentally incapable of this. I can't do it yet means that with some practice, maybe with some training, then I will be able to do this. I also want to think about this externally too. How do we talk to our team? Do we use all or nothing language? We either meet this deadline or we fail. What are our built-in mini successes? How do we communicate to others? That matters. And my formal leaders out there, how you communicate really, really matters. Finally, number 4, altering emotional tendencies. I know this one sounds weird and it's an academic term, but it is used to describe our ability to recognize our own emotional responses and reactions. Because the goal here is if we recognize that we get really nervous in public speaking, that we have sweaty palms and a heightened heart rate, that eventually we'll be able to reinterpret that stress as an energizer, recognizing that our body has created extra adrenaline and start to see that then as extra energy rather than something to weigh us down. Again, easier said than done, but come on, who can't benefit from practicing how to harness those nerves into possible usable energy? Remember, my friends, leading well is hard because it is hard, not because you're doing it wrong. We never said leadership was easy. We said it was a communication-based skill, can always be improved, always be fine-tuned, and always be sharpened. A sincere thank you to all of my leading listeners out there. I have truly, truly enjoyed working on season 1 and chatting with you and getting to know you. Thank you for letting me into your car or on your phone to go on walks with you or prep dinner with you. That sounded far, far creepier than I intended. But the point is, you, my leading listeners, you are appreciated. I look forward to chatting about even more ways in which you can make your work life what you want it to be in season 2, coming in the new year. All right, my friends, that wraps up our conversation today. Until next time, communicate with intention and lead with purpose. I'm looking forward to chatting with you again soon on The Communicative Leader.